religious leaders, anti-war organizers, to make a stand around what is currently happening in Venezuela. We're here advocating for peaceful dialogue. We are here saying no to U.S. intervention, or any intervention at that. We are saying that each country, each nation has the right to be democratic and to be able to develop their politics as they wish, and therefore we should be respectful of that. We're going to be taking a couple of minutes for each of the folks that are here to speak. I will take my turn at the end, but I would like to pass the mic on to Willie Baptist, who is a community organizer and leader around issues of homelessness.
Okay, hello everybody. My name is Willie Baptist. I've been organizing among the poor and homeless here in the United States for over 50 years. I want to join others here in going on record opposing military intervention in Venezuela and making a clear statement for peace and a peaceful negotiated settlement of the controversy. Military solutions have never solved the problems of growing homelessness and poverty here in the United States. Military solutions have never solved the problems of the deepening healthcare crises and environmental crisis here in the United States. Military solution and military interventions have never solved the problems of the poor worldwide. And it can't solve the problems of the people in Venezuela. We want to make this statement very clear, and I want to join here with my brothers and sisters here and worldwide in condemning the efforts to bring about some kind of coup or some kind of change in the wrong direction in Venezuela. Peace is the only humanitarian course of action toward peaceful solution to this controversy. That's my statement.
Thank you, Willie. I'm going to ask Ahmad Sierra, who is an organizer in the Bronx with Green Workers Cooperative, to give us a few words.
Thank you. My name is Omar Freya. I'm the founder and part of Green Worker Cooperatives. So we are based in the Bronx, and we help people to start up worker-owned businesses or worker cooperatives. And for the past 15 years of our existence, we have worked tirelessly to create a different kind of economic model in New York City and in the Bronx, and we've had great successes in that. We have been since 2005, when former President Hugo Chavez came to New York and came to the Bronx, and we had the opportunity to spend time with him, and we, and along with many others in the Bronx, have really had a close relationship with Venezuela, and we have seen and lived in solidarity with Venezuela. And so for us, what is happening now is an affront. It is an affront to democracy, where people in Venezuela have, for a long time, have had excellent records of democratic participation that in their own election process that have rivaled and surpassed even election processes here in the United States. And so for us, we see what is happening, what has been happening, and what is certainly happening now with an attempted coup as something that goes against the tide of democratic process that we in the cooperative movement are major fans of. We believe in democratic process in our workplaces, in every aspect of life. And so to see what is taking place now is something that that those of us, many in the United States, have turned a blind eye to and have bought the line of a right-wing government here in the United States is an affront to democracy. Let the people of Venezuela determine their own fate in every aspect of life, and that is something that we abide by. We want to see happen. We want to see more of it here in the United States, and certainly we do not believe that that any government has the right to intervene in the processes of any other government. And so the people of Venezuela should be able to determine their own fate as it stands.
Gracias, Omar. Next, we'll hear from Reverend Lee Harris, who is a Presbyterian minister and also a community leader.
I want to start with some words from the prophet Jeremiah. This is what the Lord says. Do what is just and right. Rescue from the hand of the oppressor the one who has been robbed. Do no wrong or violence to the foreigner, the children, or the widow, and do not shed innocent blood in this place. The prophet Jeremiah is clear. No more war. No more military intervention. No more sanctions. We must end poverty. We must promote peace. We must stand for democracy and national sovereignty. Intervention, militarism, violence are never the solution. But what Venezuela needs, what this world needs, is dialogue. War is costly. Intervention is costly. The U.S. spends 53 cents of every discretionary dollar on the military, but less than 15 cents on healthcare, education, and anti-poverty programs combined. Indeed, in the words of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., bombs dropped on the poor of other countries explode on the poor at home. So as a Christian minister, as a U.S. citizen, as a mother and a daughter, I say no more violence. If Trump and the United States wants to do something to relieve the suffering of the Venezuelan people, they should immediately lift the crippling sanctions placed on the country, which have greatly exacerbated shortages of food, medicine, and other essential goods. The United Nations Human Rights Council has condemned those sanctions, impacting more than 40,000 people. They refer to them as unilateral coercive measures and consider them illegal under international law, disproportionately harming the poor. No intervention. Peace is the only solution.
Thank you, Liz. Up next, we have Brittany the Barros, who's part of About Face.
My name is Brittany Ramos de Barros. I'm currently an Army Psychological Operations Officer. Today, I speak as a member of About Face Veterans Against the War. I am a veteran of the war in Afghanistan, another war that we sold to the American people as for the liberation and benefit of the Afghan people and for the safety of American people here. On a war that is ongoing, a war that has seen tens of thousands of dead Afghan men, women, children, and the like. I am personally acquainted with our legacy of invasion and overthrow and culpable for oil, for profit, for political gain, and then those invasions and overthrows sold to the American people as righteous, patriotic, democratic. We're in a new and powerful moment, though. We're stepping into an opportunity where we're seeing new growth that will manifest healthcare and housing and self-determination as universal human rights. The idea that we can overthrow a democratically elected government or that we can solve these humanitarian problems through military intervention is an archaic device that we must leave in the past as we step into this era of new growth. Even if you don't believe that the fact that Maduro was elected is reason enough not to support a coup, even if you don't believe that the bloodshed and death and destruction isn't enough for us not to invade, even if you believe that there is some beneficial reason that we support intervention, decades of intervention across Latin America have demonstrated that that theory is ineffective from a purely military and political perspective. We have overthrown over 41 governments across Latin America and have only created more humanitarian crisis as a result. And we allow far-right fascist governments to stand, lest anyone believe that our agenda in military overthrow is actually righteous. It's time for us to leave this behind, regardless of where you sit on the political spectrum. It's not right, but it's just not effective, and it's time for us to step into an era that is about building and growth instead of death and destruction. Thank you.
Thank you, Brittany. Next, we'll have Ben Becker from the Answer Coalition.
Good afternoon. I'm representing the Answer Coalition, Act Now to Stop War and End Racism, which is an anti-war organization that formed in opposition to the Afghanistan war in 2001 and organized some of the largest rallies of hundreds of thousands and millions of people against the Iraq War in 2003 and in the years following. We also organized against the bombing and destruction of Libya in 2011, and we've been in the streets for months against a coup or an intervention of any type against the government of Venezuela. I give that context because what we are seeing is really 2 decades of war for empire and for oil that has continued regardless of who the US president was. It was Bush, it was Obama, and now it's the Trump administration. What do Iraq, Libya, and Venezuela have in common is that they control some of the largest oil reserves in the world. Of course, if the US government announced that it was going to war for oil or for geostrategic assets or for profit, no one would support it. And so they, of course, have to disguise their aims through flowery phrases like freedom and democracy. They really expect the people of this country and the people of the world to have a very short memory. When they declare that what's happening in Venezuela, they've called it Operation Freedom. That's what Juan Guaido, the self-declared fake president of Venezuela, has called it, Operation Freedom. We know what those words are. In Iraq, they called it Operation Iraqi Freedom. And what has come to Iraq? Death, destruction, division. That's what they have in store. And what's come to Libya? Death, destruction, division, and slavery has actually returned to the country of Libya. What do they have in store for Venezuela is just more chaos to overthrow the government. The only thing truthful about the words Operation Freedom is not the word freedom, but the word operation. What we're witnessing is an operation indeed. It's an operation that's been planned for at least a year when the Trump administration openly talked about wanting to overthrow the sovereign government of Venezuela. Last year, the opposition leaders were nearing an agreement. They had dialogue with the government of Venezuela, and it was clear that they received an order from the United States to cease negotiating, to cease dialogue with the Maduro government, to not run in the elections precisely for this purpose, precisely for the purpose that then they could declare the elections illegitimate, the government illegitimate, and create a context then for intervention. But as with the case of Iraq, with Libya, all the plans that are hatched in Washington always make the same mistake. They always misjudge and miscalculate the degree of pride, the degree of patriotism, and people's love for their sovereignty. And the people of Venezuela, we know, are standing strong, actually, against an intervention. Regardless of what their political beliefs are, the vast majority of Venezuelans oppose U.S. sanctions, which are crippling the economy and exacerbating the economic problems. They oppose a U.S. intervention, whether it's through drones or special forces or U.S. Marines. And the Pentagon always misjudges the people of the United States too. And just like there were millions of people who came out against the Iraq War, and many, many people came out against an attack on Syria and Libya, we've already seen the emergence of an anti-war movement today in 2019 against the Trump administration. They really expect us to believe that the government that's building a wall at the southern border, that the government that's turning away refugee asylees just when they show up at the border saying they don't even have a right to appeal for asylum, that same government somehow cares about the people of Venezuela, cares about their freedom. We're not so dumb to really believe these lies. And we say, if you're someone who doesn't trust the Trump administration on all these other issues, on immigration, when he's bigoted towards LGBTQ people, if you don't believe his lies about all those other issues, why would you believe his lies now? The people of this country have a duty and an obligation to stand up, and we are going to stand up. Thousands have marched already, and if the Trump administration pursues this agenda of escalation, whether it's with the Democratic Party co-signers in the Senate and House, the people of this country are going to stand up once again. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. And we have Sarah Flounder, coordinator of the No War Against Venezuela campaign, and also co-founder of the International Action Center.
Thank you. And good afternoon. Sarah Flounders from International Action Center and the No War on Venezuela campaign. I want to especially raise the No War on Venezuela campaign because the last U.S. frantic effort on February 23rd to create a crisis at the border was met with a huge mobilization throughout Venezuela, but also met with organized protests in 153 cities around the world. The people of the world, the whole world, stand with Venezuela against U.S. orchestrated coups and sanctions. And this latest frantic U.S. effort at a coup against a democratically elected government, the democratically elected government of Venezuela, it will also fail as every past effort has failed. It's really taking place on the eve of May Day. May Day throughout Latin America, throughout the world, is a day of people power. And that is what the United States and its Wall Street and all of its arms want to defeat, want to push back, is people power. I was very moved in my recent visit to Venezuela to see a mobilization on a huge scale of people organized, resisting and building a new life in people's councils, in communes, in a 2 million strong militia, in an armed force that is patriotic to the goals of democracy and a new future. All of this can't be defeated by a small grouping. And we have seen a level of resistance to U.S. endless wars. We're very confident in the ability of the people of Venezuela to resist the onerous starvation sanctions that are being imposed, the theft, the looting, really piracy of their resources, of their money on every level. We call for respect for the democratic processes in Venezuela, respect for the people of Venezuela, their ability to decide their own destiny and future. Venezuela needs peace. They need control of their resources. They need an end to the sanctions. We're also, just to add, that the latest U.S. effort and every effort, these starvation sanctions, all of this is a violation of the UN Charter, of international law, of the U.S. laws. It absolutely is brigandage, piracy on an international level without any basis. And the people of the world stand with Venezuela today and with a future without endless war.
Thank you. So, as you all could hear from our speakers, we are also denouncing, like Ben said, decades of different forms of intervention and attacks against Venezuela. We know that the sanctions, you know, when we talk about sanctions, we hear the word and it's very empty, but it's not empty to the folks that are suffering from those sanctions. We're talking about the human loss and the cost of sanctions. We're talking about 40,000 folks at least that have died based on those sanctions that the U.S. has imposed on Venezuela. We're talking about a media blockade, being able to only listen to the side of the elite that have capitalist interests in Venezuela. We don't hear the voices of the people in Venezuela who are defending the Venezuelan process and democracy. People who right now are in crowds in Caracas, making sure that the opposition doesn't take over their palace. We know that historically in Latin America, we've had cases of military intervention that have caused exiles, deaths, forced migration, economic unrest. Historically, we have Chile in 1973. We have the Dominican Republic in 1965. So there's history. And we are advocating and asking for the American people to become aware of that history, because we have a responsibility. We have 1968 in Vietnam, and I will bring forth the words of Muhammad Ali when he was asked to be drafted. He said, "What have the Viet Cong done to me? What has Venezuela done to any of us?" And we know that we have a housing crisis in the United States. We know that we have lack of access to health care in the United States. We know that unemployment is increasing in the United States. And so we need to be cautious of who is creating that for us in the United States, which are the same folks that are trying to create the unrest in Venezuela. We say, hands off Venezuela. We are against the sanctions. We are for peaceful dialogue because we understand that that is the only way. And so we will open the space for some questions from you all.
Are any of you from Venezuela, or do you have family there currently? No? I was just curious.
Well, I was in Venezuela. I've been in Venezuela several times. The last time I was in Venezuela, I was there for a couple of weeks. And so I could speak to that if that's your, so they might not be my blood relatives, but I do have friends and family that are in Venezuela.
Yeah, so can you speak to that? I mean, have you been in contact with them today or yesterday or with everything going on?
Some of our friends in Venezuela are saying that what is happening is also part of the media blockade. So there's a lot that has happened in Venezuela based on social media. So the use of Twitter to present a reality that is false. Most of the streets in Caracas, if not all the streets in Caracas, are calm right now. But what we hear in the mainstream media is that there's a civil war that's happening. And I know, Ben, you could talk a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, our friends and the people we're following in Venezuela are also saying that there's a great degree of calm in Venezuela through most of the cities. And, you know, of course, it's not as sensational to take video of calm streets. You take video of the couple hundred people throwing rocks. But, you know, I do think it's also important that often sometimes anti-war activists get asked, but you're not Venezuelan, so you don't have the right to speak on this. And, you know, the fact is that none of this could be happening without the U.S. government. And as Americans, this is happening in our country, is where these plans are being hatched. It's with our tax dollars that guns are going to mercenary forces throughout Latin America. I didn't have friends and family in Iraq or Afghanistan either, but you have a responsibility to stop interventionism because you live here, and your government's doing it in your name. So that's why we're speaking up. It's not so much that you don't have to be a Venezuelan. You have to be a human being who cares about peace.
What's happening in Venezuela right now, and how do you guys get the flow of information?
Do you want to answer?
Yeah, right now in Caracas, from video feeds that I've seen, there is a huge mobilization, very, very strong, in front of the presidential palace. I mean, people are out in the tens and tens of thousands to defend and protect their government, and there are mobilizations taking place across the country, orderly, organized mobilizations. And these are organized from the community councils on down. It really is quite a phenomena, and it's not shown in the media here, but it's very visible.
To anyone who's on social media, you can see images, pictures of these major mobilizations. People responded immediately to this latest frantic effort.